In this video, we're going to cover how to elegantly lazy load images on a website as they move into the user's view. Before recording this video, I created this simple web page, similar to something you might find on a blog. There's something very wrong with it though that may not immediately jump out to you. If we look at the Networks tab in our Dev Tools over here, we'll see that visiting this page requires downloading 1.16 megabytes of assets. The majority of these megabytes are images, and there are only a few images on this page. In a world that's moving more and more towards mobile, this is something that we have to be concerned with. This project is relatively simple. It only has a single HTML file, a single CSS file, a single JavaScript file, and a handful of images. We're going to start here in our HTML file. Each of the cards in this web page is really a section tag and has a single image inside of it. What we're going to do is start off by adding a couple data attributes to our images. Those data attributes are going to be data source and data loaded. Now what I've already done is I've created extremely scaled down versions of each of the images on this page and named it the same as the original image, except I've added -small to the end of the file name. So we're going to change the source attribute of these images to show that. If we head back over to our browser, reload the page, we'll see that the total asset size is way smaller than when we started out. We're going to use these images when the page first loads to decrease the initial size of downloaded assets for our users. However, if a user saw something this pixelated, that probably wouldn't be good, so we are going to make one change. I like the file size of these images, but I wish they were a little blurred out. So that's what we're going to do. Now, rather than using Photoshop or another editing program to create these blurred images, I'm actually going to use CSS. So if we go over to our CSS file, I'm going to add 2 more selectors to the bottom of this page. Data loaded equals false. And data loaded equals true. Now inside of the first selector, I'm going to add filter blur 4 pixels. And then inside of the second selector, I'm going to add filter blur 0 pixels. And then I have to go back over to my HTML file and change data loaded to be false. And we're going to do that for each of our images. I should have done that earlier, but I forgot to do that. Now if we reload our page, we'll see some nice blurry images instead of the pixelated ones that we saw a moment ago. Now that we have this working, let's get working on swapping these images out for the full size images. What we're going to do is once an image has been scrolled to, we're going to populate the source attribute of that image with the value of the data source attribute. I actually realized I didn't do this earlier, so I'm going to quickly do that now, cut the video, and then cut back to the video once all those have been populated. Alright, I'm back and I've populated all the data source attributes on this page. Now we're going to use an API called Intersection Observer to let us know when the images on the page are within the user's view. To get started with Intersection Observer, let's head over to our JavaScript file and create a const variable called IO. And on the right hand side, we'll instantiate a new Intersection Observer instance. This will take 2 parameters. The first being a callback function, and the second being an object of options. Now because it's the simpler of the two, let's create the options parameter. We can do that by declaring a const called options. Set it to be equal to an arrow function. And have that function return an object. And this object is going to have a key of root margin that we're going to set to be 0 pixels for now. And a key of threshold that we're going to set to be 0.0 for now. And I should have quotes around this. Next, let's create the callback function. We're going to do that by setting a variable const callback. Set that to also be an arrow function. Except this function will take 2 parameters. Entries and observer. Now inside the body of this function, we're going to iterate over the entries parameter with entries.forEach. Now inside of this, we're going to add another arrow function. Have our parameter for this function be entry. And then inside of the function, we'll add a condition to check to see if the specific entry is on the page with entry.isIntersecting. Now inside of this condition is where we want to update the source attribute for the image with the value of the data source attribute. We'll do that by declaring a const variable called image and set it to be equal to entry.target. Next, we'll change the source attribute of that image with image.source and set that to be equal to image.getAttribute data source. And after that happens, we'll change the data loaded attribute of the image so that it removes the blur filter with image.setAttribute. It would help if I spelled attribute correctly. Data loaded and true. And finally, we'll stop observing this image with observer unobserve image. Now we only have one thing left to do for this to work, and that's to actually call intersection observer on the image. We'll do that by getting all of our images with const images and set that to be equal to document dot query selector all image tag and then images dot for each. We're going to iterate over each image and call io.observe on each of these images. Now if we head back to our web page, scroll to the top, reload, we'll notice that we have an error here. Can't access lexical declaration callback before initialization. All right, so we're going to head back to our code. And what that's saying is I have const io with new intersection observer, callback, and options. And callback and options are declared below const io. So if I take these, cut them, paste them up here, fix my spacing, head back over to my page, reload. There we go. If I reload the page again, we'll see a blurry image that gets swapped out with a non-blurry one. You can see this image right here is a little bit blurry, or it may be hard to see that, but it is. And there we go. Actually, if we head back over to our Networks tab, scroll to the top of the page here, hard refresh again, we'll notice that the initial page load is now only 223 kilobytes. That's way down from our 1.16 megabytes earlier. It's saving our users bandwidth, and it's improving the user experience. So that's it. Now you know how to intelligently lazy load images as the user scrolls. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.